As Gai Shishir's words fell, a force of destruction around him shrouded Yi Futian. As Gai Shishir's words fell, a force of destruction around him shrouded Yi Futian. With Gai Shishir as the leader, then Horde was a little encouraged. But their goal was the fruits of the way, not to kill Yi Futian. If he were killed, the next task would be for Gai Shishir. Many speculated that Yi Futian was a secret disciple of Lord Taixian. Under such circumstances they would not harm him. Among those who came for the slaying, the cultivators from the divine capital of Xiling were also there. Luo Yuming, who was severely injured by Yi Futian in the past, was hidden in the darkness. A strong death current circulated around Luo Yuming, wrapping him within on Luo Yuming's body. A strong will of death gathered, like a god of death, with an extremely dangerous atmosphere. Those ghostly eyes stared at Yi Futian below, and there was murderous intent in his eyes. The strength of this man from Taixian Mountain was so great to the point that it made him a little alarmed. Even Gai Shishir could not kill him when he took out the divine spear. Yi Futian looked at the cultivators from all areas. People in the Saint Plain had a stable state of mind and often acted with decisiveness, which was being demonstrated at this moment. Even though they were risking their lives and under great danger, these people still refused to give up and wanted to loot the fruits of the way. This state of mind was resolute and decisive. He had killed one of them, and it still did not deter them. I will give you one last chance. Those who haven't attacked, I will never pursue this matter further. Yi Futian's voice was indifferent, yet it exuded an extremely dominant spirit. It seemed that even with all the powerful cultivators teamed up against him, he was still confident that he was invincible. This kind of boldness, what peerless magnificence! Countless people in Linxiao City looked up into the sky. They were all quite shaken. Who would have thought that a swordsman from Taixian Mountain could be so magnificent in the face of so many powerful cultivators aiming to take his life? He was calm and confident. It seemed as if those who were around him would fall behind, so that he could face the strong enemies alone. One man faced many. What strength must he possess? It was important to note that those who besieged him were extremely fearsome characters, even including top genius talent from the Golden Divine Nation like Gai Shishir. Even so, his arrogance could not be restrained. Yi Futian's words faded, but no one moved. All those who were surrounding him for the kill were of the Nirvana plane, and they could hardly be threatened by words alone. The destructive might of the way was still powerful, and it enveloped Yi Futian's body. It seemed that with a single thought, an attack could be launched. Yi Futian's eyes swept toward the crowd, and when he saw that no one vacillated, he knew that this battle would end in a bloodbath. It's not easy to cultivate in the Great Path. The Nirvana realm is only a step away from proving the way. The fruits of the way are not a determining factor, Yi Futian said. Is this necessary? As his voice fell, and the sound of elephant hollering could be heard through heaven and earth. The dazzling golden divine elephant engulfed the way of heaven and earth. Its majestic torso was still expanding, and it was erected between heaven and earth. Bang! The divine elephant stepped into the void, and deployed the divine elephant stomping the sky. At this moment, countless cultivators in Linxiao City let out a muffled groaning sound. As their hearts and spirits were shaking, their blood was roiling with their breath. Whether it was their body or their mental state, they were enduring an unparalleled power of repression. It was as if the great path in the world was suppressing them, holding them there in place. They wanted to move, but found that it was difficult even to lift their feet. Even their hands were trembling. Their hearts were beating quickly, and they looked toward Yi Futian, who was in the void. Yi Futian's whole body was dazzling with divine light, and there was a celestial shadow blooming behind him. It seemed to be possessed a celestial soul. With the divine elephant stomping the sky, they felt it step directly on them, leaving their flesh and spiritual soul both suppressed. At the same time, a space will of the way was covering the endless space. At this moment, the entire world seemed to be suppressed and solidified, on the verge of stopped flowing. In the void, all eyes were fixed on Yi Futian. Everyone's expression was very grave. One step to suppress the void. This was to suppress the great path, the way of space. Yi Futian's body moved. He crossed the void in a single step and walked toward a person. The man's eyes gazed at Yi Futian, whose figure continuously enlarged in his pupils. It was as if this far distance was within reach. His entire body started burning up, turned into a war god of flame. It broke through that suppressive force. There were flames of Renhuang grade that flowed and moved toward Yi Futian to swallow him. Yi Futian blasted out a punch. It was the divine elephant void-splitting fist, whose destructive force of the great path destroyed everything. Under the guidance of the celestial soul attraction, all spirit souls were destroyed and suppressed. Boom! An explosive sound came out, and everyone saw a ball of fire erupting. It was a Renhuang grade divine implement. It fell down from the sky. As for that cultivator of Nirvana realm, his soul and spirit dispersed completely, and he disappeared entirely. One punch destroyed everything, leaving nothing left. Those below watched this punch, and they were greatly afraid. Just how terrifying was its power. When the other cultivators saw this, their expression changed, and their hearts were pounding. They had all broken out of the bondage of the might of Wei, and launched a simultaneous attack on Yi Futian. Many destructive methods came toward Yi Futian, trying to entomb him. However, when the attacks descended, they seemed to get close to Yi Futian, but were somehow unable to touch him. At this moment, many people had the illusion of beyond reach. Again, the utilization of space will of the Wei. Buzz! The brilliant divine light of space was shining, but Yi Futian's body had disappeared from where he was. As those methods and blasted together, causing the eruption of a shocking destructive force, Yi Futian had already completely detached himself from the attacks, and appeared on high ground. But at this time, a golden divine light descended from the sky, which was the strongest among those who besieged him. It was Gai Shir. The golden divine spear penetrated the void, bringing down with it the endless golden divine light, and came straight down, aiming for Yi Futian's head. Yi Futian walked in the sky. The earth shook, and the sky roared as both of his fists broke through the air at the same time, blasting out infinite aurora of the fist. The radiant will of the fist punched through the void, and collided with those golden divine lights that were coming at him. Just as Yi Futian and Gai Shir confronted each other, there was a sudden intrusion of death will. Infinite light of darkness appeared around Yi Futian, breaking through the air in an instant. It seemed to be able to lock onto his spiritual soul, and move towards him, trying to slaughter him. At a glance, it was endless darkness that covered this space. This endless flow of dark death current was like countless nails, which caused a shock to his celestial soul. It seemed as if it was nailed in the void. Countless death air currents came for the kill at the same time, like countless nails that descended simultaneously. These attacks were all invisible attacks, unconcerned with the power of offense or defense. Their only aim was the spiritual soul. The celestial soul behind Yi Futian fluttered, and there were traces of dark will that enveloped the celestial soul and flowed inside Yi Futian's body. His eyes swept in one direction, and he saw Luo Yuming, the prince of divine capital of Xiling. At this time, his celestial soul seemed to have been peeled away from the body and turned into a god of death. This attack had precisely been released from there. Boom! Yi Futian's celestial soul shook, and a brilliant celestial light erupted. There were actually countless air currents of swordsmanship directly blooming from the celestial soul, as the celestial soul attraction stamped the sword into the celestial soul attack. There seemed to be endless swords of spiritual soul sweeping out, destroying those death currents. Simultaneously, the force of Gai Shir's attack descended again, as well as his person, carrying with him the golden divine spear and the power of the divine gods to attack at close range. Its might was unbelievably aggressive. The divine elephant stomping the sky. Yi Futian raised his eyes and glanced toward the other. One step, and thousands of elephants rushed across, crushing the void. They slammed toward Gai Shir's spear. Yi Futian disappeared as a sword like a brilliant streamer of light, deftly avoiding the attack that was forming the other side. With a wave of his hands in the void, suddenly, countless swords between heaven and earth were born. Many looked up at him, and saw that the sword light was shining brightly. There seemed to be many sword rivers of the great path, that appeared to flow between heaven and earth. Pust! His figure disappeared again, and went in another direction. It was the one who had just attacked him. That cultivator's expression changed slightly. The strength exhibited by Yi Futian was also the one that he was afraid the most. Clad in armor, his entire body burst out with an unparalleled heavy force. He walked like a war god of the Great Path. His body was like a Runhuang battle form. With the magnification of the divine implements, it was not any less than the true Runhuang battle form. His entire body erupted with divine light. Bang! Both fists blasted through the sky and earth, directly slamming toward Yi Futian, who was zooming in. The void seemed to have been punched through and pulverized. Its strength was immeasurable. But Yi Futian did not make an effort to evade it. Instead, his sword-like figure moved directly down. There was a resonance of thousands of swords between heaven and earth, and the terrible sound of elephants rumbling. The Great Path was won. There was an immense sense of swordsmanship in his body that turned his body into a sword. Bang! The fist was penetrated and destroyed. A sword light crossed the void, and that nirvana figure disappeared completely, save for a sword mark left in the void. Another Runhuang divine implement, which was picked up by Yi Futian. Hunt to kill. Everyone's heart was pounding. Cultivators were hunted down by Yi Futian, one after another. He had temporarily avoided the strongest of them all, which was Gai Shirshir, and escaped being tied down. He could not defeat Gai Shirshir instantly, but he was able to kill any others in seconds. Gai Shirshir's attack was unable to restrain Yi Futian, nor could anybody else. Many people looked at the figure in the void and thought that Taishan Mountain had really produced an extraordinary genius talent. He had used his own power to contend with all the powerful cultivators. Not only was he not at a disadvantage, but he was hunting the others one by one. This kind of people was too terrifying. At this time, Yi Futian standing there with his hands forming the seal, the ancient tree of the world swaying within him. The blood inside of him howled, and the will of the way tossed and turned as a majestic breath erupted from his body. Behind Yi Futian, majestic figures akin to divine gods could vaguely be seen. Many divine elephants surrounded him, trampling wildly between heaven and earth to block the attack from outside. As he closed his eyes, his spiritual will radiated outward, shrouding the boundless space. At this moment, the swords on many people in Linqiao City were trembling. Some even flew out of the sheaths. It was as if the sword will in their bodies was flowing outside of their controls. Above the sky, countless divine swords appeared, circling around heaven and earth, thus wrapping the vast and boundless space within it. Yi Futian's body seemed to be the master of all swords, and the infinite divine sword resonated because of him. Divine swords, one after the other, ran through the void, tearing it, like a meteor sword, leaving sword marks between heaven and earth. He meant to kill them as a group. Everyone's heart pounded. Wan Shui watched from afar. His pupils contracted as he stared at the scene. He felt the real fleeting of years. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Inside Yi Futian's body, the dazzling glory of swordsmanship gleamed. Shadows of swords appeared. It was as if all the veins of his body had turned into veins of swords, and his blood had turned into a sword river. His entire body was now the sword that ruled all other swords. Inside Yi Futian's body, the dazzling glory of swordsmanship gleamed. Shadows of swords appeared. It was as if all the veins of his body had turned into veins of swords, and his blood had turned into a sword river. His entire body was now the sword that ruled all other swords. Sword body of the Great Path. Many people were trembling in their hearts. Was this an indication that the sword body of the Great Path was about to be forged? Thousands of swords returned against the current. It was no longer the swordsmanship that was released from Yi Futian, but an infinite sword that was born from heaven and earth, coming toward Yi Futian. This could only be accomplished by someone who had gathered the soul of the way. But Yi Futian clearly had not yet reached that level of intensity. This could only mean that his spiritual will was stronger than the power of ordinary men. Countless divine swords reversed as the swords locked onto the sky. Roaring sounds of the Great Path came out of all the cultivators, and an amazing power exploded forth. Some raised their hands to attack, destroying the coming swords, But several other swords came toward them as they tore the void, leaving a sword mark as they continued to the target. He continued to attack, but saw more and more swords. Left and right, top and bottom, there were divine swords on all sides. It was endless. This scene caused a great disturbance in Yi Futian's heart. It was as if he was facing the illusion of the divine wheel of the Runhuang swordsmanship. Bang, bang, bang. One sword could not execute the killing, but what about countless swords? Moreover, the sword was getting stronger, turning into a storm that countered the great path, destroying all methods. It was not just him, but everyone was contending with this imprisoning swordsmanship. A swordsmanship storm appeared in every direction, and this swordsmanship storm was resonating with one another, as if to become a giant storm that would annihilate the existence of everything. The people in Linqiao City looked up into the sky. At this time, there were countless divine swords. Yi Futian was standing in the center of the storm, and those countless divine swords resonated with his body as the center. It's so strong. Everyone trembled. What had they experienced in the divine palace? Gai Shishir also stared at Yi Futian with indifferent eyes. Golden divine spears were flowing around his body and collided with the swords. The extremely holy and godlike figure stood there and could not be shaken. Such swordsmanship alone from Yi Futian would naturally not affect him. But if this continued, the others would end up in great misery. The golden divine spear was raised, and the divine light shot out from it. However, at this time, Yi Futian's eyes opened, and an extremely overbearing divine aura came out of them. He raised his hand, and suddenly, the sky was covered with suffocating pressure. His fist blasted toward the front, dazzling with divine light, but no one knew what he intended to do. When he blasted out the aurora of the fist, he stepped out simultaneously and crossed the void in a single step. He appeared in front of a man who was fighting against the swordsmanship. The divine spring had already penetrated the void and was charging downward. Boom! There was no hesitation. Under the shocking sound of elephant trumpeting, as thousands of divine elephants rushed by, the great path collapsed. The man's body was directly punched through as his soul scattered, and he was knocked away, powerlessly into the distance. Dominating. Everyone's heart trembled. Under the attack of the divine sword, coupled with the power of the divine elephant, it was invincible. Yi Futian continued to step forward. He appeared in another spot in an instant. Only those cultivators who had Runhuang divine implements dared to confront Yi Futian. Therefore, even though his swordsmanship was superior, it was only able to trap them but not eradicate them. However, Yi Futian, whose body contained the bones of the supreme divine elephant emperor, had a close-quarter attack that was enough to break his opponent's defense. Bang! 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 A series of dull sounds came out, and each sound was accompanied by the fall of a Nirvana plane character, which struck fear in people's hearts. These were all people who were qualified to enter the divine palace. None of them was an easy opponent, as they were all of the strongest existence in Nirvana realm. But at this moment, they seemed to have become mediocre, which was the result of the suppression of their talent, as well as the crushing of their combat power. Any genius talents would still look unremarkable in front of peerless characters. All the cultivators seemed to be reduced into supporting roles at the moment, probably just to accentuate the name of Shun Jing from Taishan Mountain. Boom! It was unknown how many died in the continuous attacks. Those who were still resisting Yi Futian's swordsmanship finally felt a strong sense of fear. Yi Futian was not joking, he was killing for real. Furthermore, he also could battle. If they continued to fight, it would probably only spell death for them. Let's go. Many people thought about leaving at the same time, although they had a tenacious state of mind and were willing to risk fighting to obtain the fruits of the way. The situation now could no longer be solved by taking a risk. Yi Futian had demonstrated superior fighting power that was enough to kill them all. Continuing to fight could only mean death. Those who had not yet perished kept pulling back, ready to evacuate from the battlefield. Yi Futian glanced at them, but the swordsmanship still attacked forward, chasing them, forcing them to continue their retreat into a distant area, so that they disappeared from this battlefield. Yi Futian did not continue to pursue them. He was surrounded and attacked, and he had no choice but to kill his opponent. However, he knew that killing them would not benefit him at all. He turned his eyes in a direction, then stepped into the void. The sky oscillated as the divine elephants rushed through the sky. He walked toward a man who was retreating. The man was Luo Yuming, and this was not the first time that the prince of the divine capital of Xiling had provoked him. The Renhuang divine implement he was equipped with seemed to have the effect of attacking and destroying spiritual souls. Luo Yuming was also retreating. He had realized that it couldn't be done. Even the joint attack could not ensnare Yi Futian. The combat power exhibited by this man too terrifying. He was stronger beyond imagination. There was indeed superior and powerful Renhuang magic in his body. Under such circumstances he had to give up. However, at this time, he saw Yi Futian coming toward him, which caused Luo Yuming's pupils to shrink. Did this guy only pursue him? A giant figure of the underworld appeared above the sky, and the world was rendered dark and dim, as the will of death shrouded the world. It seemed that there was a pair of dead eyes that stared at Yi Futian. Death will directly invaded and rushed into his eyes to corrupt all his veins, nerves, and internal organs, so that they lost their vitality. However, Yi Futian not only ate the fruit of life, but also swallowed the fist of life in the land of proving the way. If the wills of the way were to be ranked, then will of life would rank the highest, as its abundant vitality seemed to turn into a sea of life inside the body, flooding and eradicating the invading will of death. Luo Yuming looked badly. His palms were waving, and there appeared to be a formation of the nether matrix in the void, with numerous dark currents shot out from the matrix. Yi Futian felt that his spiritual soul was exposed. Those dark currents like nails, nailing onto his spiritual soul. This attack was extremely strange. It was as if the spiritual soul was not strong enough. He would have been killed directly. Yi Futian's spiritual soul bloomed. The divine elephant inside his body roared, and the divine sword was unleashed. At the same time, he raised his hand and tightened his fist, as if taking hold of the nether shadow in the void. Luo Yuming's body stiffened, and he felt that his spiritual soul was imprisoned. Just as he had attacked Yi Futian's spiritual soul, the same tactic was used on him by the other. Boom! Yi Futian continued stepping forward, and each step seemed to suppress the great path, destroying the spiritual soul. Countless divine elephants trampled between heaven and earth, creating a scene that was shocking to behold. Luo Yuming felt tightness all over his body, enduring a terrible force of oppression. But Yi Futian's body is still radiant, and the will of the way was extremely abundant. This was something that Luo Yuming could not compare with at all. Both of Yi Futian's fists blasted out simultaneously, and explosive sounds continuously came from Luo Yuming's body. It was as if he had been pierced through while in the air, and the shadow of the underworld was also shattered in the void. Luo Yuming let out a shrill scream as his body was flying through the air. Blood came out of his mouth, and he looked terribly pale. "How dare you?" At this moment, a cold voice came from above the sky. An incredibly powerful great path descended. Its might pressed against Yi Futian's body, locking him in. Several supremely strong characters descended from the sky like divine gods. The breath released from them was the breath of Renhuang. Those who surrounded Yi Futian today all possessed extraordinary status, and came from great principalities. Among them, two were the strongest, Gai Shishir and Luo Yuming. One was the strongest descendant of the Golden Divine Nation, and the other was the prince of the divine capital of Xiling. Those who had guarded them before on their journey to the divine palace had not left, but had always remained inside Linshao City. But all the cultivators had started to attack Yi Futian, so they merely watched on the side in secret. However, now that Yi Futian had threatened Luo Yuming's life, they couldn't remain on the sidelines any longer, so they walked over to reveal themselves. Yi Futian was experiencing an extremely powerful oppressive force that seemed to imprison his spiritual soul. As the death will descended, his entire body slowed down, and his mind became dim. It was then that a strong murderous intent came behind Yi Futian. Gai Shishir had not been made any attacks because he was waiting for an opportunity. Now that the Renhuang cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling had joined the fray, this was his opportunity. Careful! Yaya's expression changed as she shouted her warning loudly. Wan Shuyi Luoyue, and the others also exclaimed in surprise, and their faces were extremely concerned. Gai Shirshur of the Golden Divine Nation was supposedly a peerless and respectful figure. Still, he had employed such a low approach to unleash his most deadly attack, when the other Renhuang were suppressing Yi Futian, so that Yi Futian's attention was divided. Shameless. The disciples of Taishan Mountain were extremely angry, no matter what they thought of Yi Futian before. Yi Futian had treated them well in the land of proving the way. Coupled with Yi Futian's unparalleled and talented combat power, they had now all recognized Yi Futian as one of their own and admired him greatly. He was the representative of their generation of Taishan Mountain. He was much stronger than Junmu, as the two were not even on the same level. Presently, Taishan Mountain needed such a person to represent them to the outside world. Junmu and the others would only bring shame to Taishan Mountain and Lord Taishan. Under such a situation, they had already thought of Yi Futian as one of them. Upon seeing Gai Shirshur's lowly ambush, there was great anger in their hearts. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The people of Linshao City were moved when they saw this scene. The Golden Divine Nation had flourished for a time and had stood at the top of the higher heavens realm. Gai Shirshur was the talented prince of the nation. How could he have known that his reputation would suffer like this? The people of Linshao City were moved when they saw this scene. The Golden Divine Nation had flourished for a time and had stood at the top of the higher heavens realm. Gai Shirshur was the talented prince of the nation. How could he have known that his reputation would suffer like this? However, he had not hesitated to resort to underhanded tricks to kill Yi Futian. But although it was dishonorable, one could see from this just how fierce he was at heart. He was fierce to others and to himself. Even though he was an outstanding talent, he did not care about his own reputation and did not care how others saw him. He only wanted to achieve his goals. People like these were truly frightening and truly deadly. For Yi Futian, Gai Shirshur's surprise attack had been extremely deadly as well. Moreover, even when he saw Gai Shirshur attack, the Renhuang from the divine capital of Xiling kept up his pressure on Yi Futian and did not withdraw it. It seemed as if he had no other goal than to see Yi Futian die at Gai Shirshur's hands. If Gai Shirshur killed Yi Futian, then Taishan Mountain would have to seek out the Golden Divine Nation to exact revenge. Yi Futian could naturally sense how threatening this situation was. He swept his cold gaze over the figure in the sky. The branches and leaves of the world tree life spirit flowed through every part of his body, and his divine light shone through heaven and earth. At the same time, the 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor were activated, and an elephant's trumpeting sound rang out through the air. There was a loud boom as the illusions of countless divine elephants wrapped around him. At the same time, the image of a lordly divine elephant covered his body. He did not have much time to react, so he could only use his most powerful defensive techniques to block Gai Shirshur's attack. Boom! There was a loud noise that made the heavens and the earth shake fiercely. Gai Shirshur drew in close to attack, and his golden divine spear pierced through countless illusions in an instant while also twisting wildly. A beam of brilliant golden light that could destroy everything pierced through the body of the divine elephant, shattering it to pieces as it wrapped around Yi Futian. Bang! The beam of golden light slammed into Yi Futian's back, its power making him stumble forward. At the same time, the Renhuang's pressure that had been oppressing him finally disappeared, but he was startled when he saw the blood staining his back. He moved forward, flying off into the distance with blood streaming from the corners of his mouth. But his eyes were still incredibly cold, and Gai Shirshur's attack was not finished yet. He continued to pursue. He could leap through space just like Yi Futian, and he was incredibly fast. He thrust out with the golden divine spear again, and beams of golden light pierced through the air, turning into more golden spears. They sought to destroy the whole area, so there was nowhere to go to avoid them. Boom! Yi Futian stepped through the air, making the sky tremble. He did not try to evade. The 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor let loose an intense radiance, and his world tree wrapped around his bones, making it all the same kind of power. At that moment, all the will in his body transformed into divine elephant power. It was not that divine elephant power was the strongest power that he possessed, but it was his strongest treasure. Therefore, he would use the divine elephant power, so that he could use it to its fullest potential. The deed of thought comprehension glowed brilliantly as his body transformed into a divine furnace. His divine elephant life spirit burst forth as well, merging with his bones. In a flash, he seemed to transform into the inheritor of the divine elephant emperor. He formed an elephant law body that could crush the very heavens. His body became golden, and divine elephant light wrapped around him. Everyone felt their hearts tremble as they beheld this scene. The attack had not managed to seriously wound him? How powerful were this guy's defenses? He must have a law body. Otherwise, an attack of that magnitude would have destroyed him. He would not have been able to recover in so short a time. Bang! 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 Golden light shining with divine radiance slammed into him, but could not break through his defenses. Guy Shirshir's power descended upon him as he floated high up in the sky, looking down. He was like a celestial prince as he thrust out with his spear again and again. His attacks still did not cease. The divine light shot forward wildly, making terrible booming sounds every time it hit Yi Futian. If he were just an ordinary Nirvana-level cultivator, he would already have been destroyed by this attack. But he was not. He stood rooted firmly in place like a divine elephant. He would stagger slightly every time the spear hit him and pierced through him, making it pierce through his afterimages as well. The dazzling light arced in front of him. This level of power was enough to destroy a Nirvana-level cultivator. But Yi Futian reached out with both hands and grabbed for the spear. Guy Shirshir frowned. Endless light shone from the golden divine spear as it shot towards Yi Futian. Was he trying to grab his Renhuang implement? A burst of incredible force hit Yi Futian. It was so strong because it had come from such a short distance. Yi Futian was only able to withstand it because he had formed a law body and activated the 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor. Bang! There was a loud noise, and Yi Futian's hands shook as he was sent flying backward. He had not managed to grab the spear. The endless light shot towards, putting him under even greater pressure. But this time, Yi Futian faced Guy Shirshir directly. He stopped moving backward and gazed at his opponent. Guy Shirshir was like a divine general, ready to conquer the world. The golden divine spear shot out, endless light flowing out of it. But unfortunately, Guy Shirshir was not strong enough to bring forth its ultimate power. Yi Futian grabbed for it with both hands again, and the mighty figure of a deity appeared behind him like a lord of the great path, suppressing everything before it. He stared at Guy Shirshir, then stepped forward. Countless divine elephants charged with him, colliding with the oncoming beams of light, and destroying them all. Boom! He stepped out through the air, and images of celestial worthies and elephants appeared as he walked towards Guy Shirshir. Everyone felt their hearts trembled as they watched this. Did he want to get into close combat with him? Guy Shirshir gripped his spear. His attack power was so strong, and yet Yi Futian still wanted to fight him at close range? Perhaps it was because he knew that he had no way to destroy his opponent from a distance due to his Renhuang implement. So his only choice was to get in close. Brilliant divine light shot out of Guy Shirshir's eyes. As the light fell towards the ground, he raised the golden divine spear and thrust it out once again, right towards where Yi Futian had appeared. Countless divine elephant images were charging towards him, and they collided with the spear. Yi Futian threw a punch, and the divine elephants cracked the very air. It seemed like they could destroy anything. Bang! In the instant that their attacks collided, space itself was distorted. The people below them could no longer see the two combatants as the light of the great path pierced their eyes. As Yi Futian lashed out with his fist, the divine spear shook, and he moved in quickly from the side, striking at Guy Shirshir's body directly. Before the fist reached him, Guy Shirshir felt that his life spirit was under fierce attack. The fistful was not just attacking his flesh. His face grew dark, and golden light shot out from his eyes. He swept out with his spear as he flew through the air, trying to evade Yi Futian's attack. But Yi Futian's thoughts had locked onto him, and he moved through the air with him. Guy Shirshir could not escape. Bang! Yi Futian's fist split the air as it crashed into Gai Shi, while his golden divine spear slammed into Yi Futian at the same time. Yi Futian seemed to have done this on purpose. He had allowed his opponent to strike him, so that he could get his attack in. Gai Shi was sent flying backward, his life spirit shaking. His golden body had been badly damaged, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The body was breaking apart, and golden blood flowed from it. Yi Futian groaned as well, but his aura was still solid. In a flash, he was moving forward again, crossing a great distance through the air. Most of the people watching down below were shocked by this. Gai Shi was in trouble. His attacks with his Renhuang implement were incredibly strong, but his defensive power was nowhere near as strong as Yi Futian's. He could not withstand Yi Futian's powerful attack. Yi Futian continued forward. In a flash, he had launched yet another attack. This time, as the air-splitting divine elephant fist lashed out, countless elephant images charged along with it towards Gai Shi, who had already been wounded. He raised his spear to block them, but Yi Futian continued to lash his fists out, and more elephants charged, making Gai Shi's life spirit shake uncontrollably. He groaned many times in succession as golden blood flowed out of him. Bang! Finally, there was a loud noise as a fist landed directly on Gai Shi's body. The spear was knocked out of his hands, and he was sent flying downwards. His face had gone pale. He still lost. Everyone trembled at this. Even with a surprise attack, he had still lost to Yi Futian. Yi Futian reached out and grabbed the golden divine spear, gripping it in his hand. He stepped forward, looking down coldly at Gai Shi, who had fallen to a lower part of the sky. There was murderous intent in his eyes. Boom! He stepped downwards holding the spear. Everyone trembled as they beheld this scene. Was Yi Futian going to kill Gai Shi? Yi Futian transformed into a beam of light, but at that moment, another burst of the power of the great path descended. Endless golden divine spears fell from the sky. Yi Futian looked up and saw golden stone pillars descending from above, giving off a fierce roar. Boom! 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 The golden stone pillars fell, forming a golden cage around him that locked him in place. Everyone looked up into the sky and saw a group of gold-armored renhuangs descending from the sky. It seemed that Gai Shi had some renhuangs protecting him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The golden armored Renhuang cultivators were like gods. The brilliant light that shone from them lit up the whole area. The golden armored Renhuang cultivators were like gods. The brilliant light that shone from them lit up the whole area. They stared at Yi Futian with sharp eyes. They had been watching the battle in secret. Since it was a battle between people on the same level, it had not been easy for them to interfere in favor of their prince. Besides, this battle was a kind of training for Gai Shi. Unfortunately, he had been defeated in the end. However, the man he was fighting was truly powerful. He possessed many different abilities. He had the ultimate technique of the divine elephants of the heavenly mandate realm. And he seemed to possess the mystical ways of the celestial gate of vast heaven. In addition, he had Lord Taishuan's fleeting divine sword, and the ultimate technique of the divine palace. He was skilled with them all, and roared throughout his body with mighty power. He had a body of the great path. In addition, his divine spirit was extraordinary. From his body to his spirit, from his attacks to his defenses, there was not a single weak point. He was almost perfect. Thus, the talented genius prince of the golden divine nation, Gai Shi, had lost to him. If this man did not die, he would become a great figure in the future. With the talent and strength that he had displayed today, he would not have to prove himself worthy to become a Renhuang. It would only be a matter of time. Although it was difficult to break through to this level, truly great figures could not be stopped from reaching it. Yi Futian looked back at them with an ugly look on his face. More Renhuang-level cultivators? These top figures whom he had originally seen off, had apparently stayed in Linshao City, waiting for the Divine Palace's journey to end. The divine capital of Xiling was just like this, and so was the Golden Divine Nation. The golden pillars locked him in place, forming a golden cage around him. He could not leave. There was an extremely ugly look on his face. He rushed forward and thrust the spear he was holding directly forward, slamming it into the golden pillars and shattering them. He continued rushing forward. He had broken through a prison created by Runhuang-level cultivators. Everyone watched the scene unfold in the air. This guy was truly strong. In fact, he could be said to be an absolute hero. He had defeated so many cultivators in this battle all by himself. No one was a match for him. Gai Shishir and Luo Yuming had been defeated. In fact, they had been crushed. However, he could not crush Runhuang-level cultivators. One of them glanced at his spear, then stepped forward, reaching out his hand. Suddenly, a terrible golden divine will appeared in his hand. In a flash, many beams of divine light shot forth from the divine wheel, transforming into chains that shot towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian's expression changed when he saw this. There were golden chains everywhere, and the divine will lit up the whole area. It was using all the will in the area, creating a prison with a single thought. This was the power of a Runhuang-level cultivator. He had forged a divine wheel that shone with the sun and the moon. A crashing sound rang out. As the endless chains descended from the sky, Yi Futian rushed through the air in a certain direction. Divine elephants charged all around him, trampling through the air. But the chains seemed to be divine. They ignored all defenses. Bang! A golden chain lashed against him. At that moment, Yi Futian could feel the great path collapse. He groaned, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Then, endless chains wrapped around him, and another chain wrenched the spear from his hands. He did all he could to hold on to it, but the chains lashed against his arm, and swept the spear firmly away from him, pulling it into his opponent's hands. And his body was held in place by the endless chains that were seemingly attached to the air itself. How could he withstand the power of a Runhuang's wheel of the great path? The Runhuang cultivator began to pull slowly, and the chain that had wrapped around Yi Futian began to pull him forward. He looked at his opponent with a cold expression. Are the Renhuangs of the Golden Divine Nation so cruel? Wan Shi stepped forward, and not only him, but the cultivators of Taishan Mountain and Yaya did as well. They had dark looks on their faces. This was simply too much. Everyone had seen clearly that in the last battle, Gai Shishir had attacked Yi Futian in order to steal his fruit of the way, and had even not hesitated to launch a surprise attack. Yi Futian had been defending himself, and once he had won, the Renhuangs of the Golden Divine Nation had interfered. The Runhuang of the Golden Divine Nation swept his gaze over them. Piercing light shot out of his eyes. He said nothing, and continued to pull Yi Futian towards him. Below them, Gai Shishir had risen as well. He had been wounded badly, and he was covered in blood. He looked coldly at Yi Futian. He rose slowly into the air. The Runhuang tossed the golden divine spear to him, and he reached out to catch it. At that moment, brilliant light shone down from the heavens. The Runhuang from the Golden Divine Nation's expression changed, and he looked up into the sky. At the same time, someone raised his hand and brought out a huge golden palm print into the air, where the light seemed to be coming down from. Bang! The palm print was instantly destroyed, and there was another roaring sound. Everyone saw Gai Shishir, who had been rising upward, disappear from his original place. Boom! There was a loud noise that made everyone's hearts tremble fiercely. They looked up, but the ground below them cracked, and fault lines spread out in all directions. Gai Shishir was thrown back to the ground. This time it was worse. He was trampled to the ground by a foot, and the Runhuang implement known as the Golden Divine Spear did not return to his hands. It was snatched away as it flew to him. The one who snatched it was the one who had trampled him to the ground. This, everyone's hearts trembled fiercely. Had someone else come? Moreover, they had managed to crush Gai Shishir underfoot? What kind of person was Gai Shishir? He was the most talented young cultivator of the Golden Divine Nation, and the nation's hopes were placed upon him. He was likely to be their future ruler. He could be defeated, but to be trampled to the ground was an incredible humiliation. How could someone be so casual? It was crazy. Did they not fear offending the Golden Divine Nation? Everyone stared over there. They saw that the one who had trampled him had a pair of thin legs, so thin they seemed to not have any bones. It was a woman. Though her legs were thin and weak-looking, She was filled with explosive power as she trampled Gai Shirshir. She was incredibly beautiful and wore a fiery red robe. She had a heroic and valiant bearing. As she stood there tall, she was not only beautiful, but also had an air of nobility about her. It was the aura of an empress. There was a hint of laziness amidst all this nobility though. There was a cold smile on her fiery red lips. Who was she? Gai Shirshir looked up at the woman. He looked very embarrassed to have been trampled by a woman like this. She had purposely humiliated him. Golden light exploded from him. But he was completely unable to break free. He stared at the woman who was stepping on him. He recognized her. He had seen her at Taishan Mountain. This is a good spear. She held up the golden divine spear and looked it over. Terrifying divine light shone from it. She lifted it up and aimed it at Gai Shirshir, making his face turn pale. How dare you? The Ren Huang from the divine golden nation's face turned ugly as he gazed at the woman coldly. She had humiliated Gai Shirshir so badly. He was the strongest young person in the golden divine nation. How dare I? The woman smiled coldly. Thrust the spear down towards Gai Shirshir's brow. It seemed like if she put even the slightest bit of pressure on it, she would pierce Gai Shirshir's head. This is a good ritual implement, she said with a grin. But her voice had a hint of murderous intent to it. At that moment, Gai Shirshir did not dare move even an inch. His face was deathly pale. His very life was in danger. He had heard about this woman back in the golden divine nation. She was crazy, extremely crazy. There was nothing that she would not do. What are you going to do? The Runhuang level cultivator from the golden divine nation's expression had changed as well. What am I going to do? There was a hint of mischief in the woman's eyes as she looked at him. I should ask you what you are doing. Do you think that Taishan Mountain doesn't exist? Or do you think that the golden divine nation is invincible, letting you do whatever you want? Fourth miss, called Wan Shuyi and the others from Taishan Mountain. They were relieved of the worries that they had had previously. Now that fourth miss was here, nothing bad would happen to Yi Futian. The golden divine nation had gone too far today. So it was no wonder that fourth Miss's anger had moved her to take action. She had dragged Gai Shirshir out of the air. She was naturally the fourth disciple of Lord Taishan, the house master of Taishan. She had been the one to bring Yi Futian to Taishan Mountain. Yi Futian was locked down and could not move. But he watched the house master of Taishan with mouth and eyes wide open. This beautiful empress really had such a violent side to her? Her foot. It was very beautiful. Just as beautiful as the rest of her. Yi Futian realized that she was more beautiful than he had first thought. Let us both release our captives, said the Runhuang from the golden divine nation to the house master of Taishan. The house master of Taishan smiled sarcastically and said, then let him go. Her opponent frowned as he stared at her. We'll let them go at the same time. You're trying to set terms? The house master of Taishan pressed the spear down, piercing Gai Shirshir's forehead down to the muscle, and making a stream of blood run down his face. Gai Shirshir went even paler, but he kept his eyes open, staring at the woman. There was a cracking sound as the chains tightened, putting pressure on Yi Futian's bones, making him groan in pain. It seems as if Gai Shirshir is not important to the golden divine nation, since no one cares if he lives or dies. The divine spear continued down bit by bit. It seemed like it would soon pierce into the center of his head. Stop! Called the Runhuang from the golden divine nation angrily. Don't you care about his life? He is just a musician at Taishan Mountain. If you don't care about Gai Shirshir's life, then I don't care about his, said the house master of Taishan. Yi Futian's face darkened. She was heartless. Such a talented musician? Said her opponent coldly. He must be a personal disciple of Lord Taishan. It doesn't matter if you believe me, said the house master of Taishan. I will count to 3, and if the chains have not been removed, then the strongest youth of the golden divine nation will die here today. 1, 2. She did not wait for her opponent, but immediately started counting. There was a clanking sound, as the chains on Yi Futian's body were suddenly retracted. A look of surprise came over everyone's face. Everyone had seen that the house master of Taishan had intervened for Yi Futian's sake, but she had been right to guess that the man from the golden divine nation would not dare gamble with his prince's life. The fourth great disciple of Lord Taixian was a difficult person to handle. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. After the Run Huang of the Golden Divine Nation had let Yi Futian go, he said to the house master of Taixian, "Will you let him go as well?" After the Run Huang of the Golden Divine Nation had let Yi Futian go, he said to the house master of Taixian, "Will you let him go as well?" The house master of Taixian moved the spear away from Gai Shishir's forehead, then looked at the Run Huang with a smile. "Don't worry, I am not as underhanded as you. I won't kill your junior." As she said this, Yi Futian flashed over to her side and said, "House master." The man from the Golden Divine Nation looked at her, waiting for her to let Gai Shishir go. She handed the Golden Divine Spear to Yi Futian and said, "Take it." Yi Futian hesitated, but in the end he still took it. The house master of Taixian laughed and said, "The battle between the two of them is not over. It was interrupted. Continue." Yi Futian was stunned, and a look of surprise came over his face. Golden light shot out of the Ren Huang from the Golden Divine Nation's eyes, and his aura swept out, covering the area. "Since the Prince of the Golden Divine Nation has entered into a life and death contest with you, launched a surprise attack on you, and had his Run Huang interfere, there is no need to be polite. The battle is not yet over, so you can do whatever you want. You can even kill him," the house master of Taixian said to Yi Futian with a smile. Yi Futian looked at her stupidly. He could even kill him? He could not tell how much of what the house master of Taixian was true, and how much was false. "Empress Yan," said the Ren Huang from the Golden Divine Nation. Empress Yan was the house master of Taishuan's title. Few people knew her real name, which was Yan Muxiwa. After all, few people called her that, but many people knew her as Empress Yan. Although there are not many people in Taixian Mountain, we still cannot allow this kind of bullying. "Big sister is here, so there's no need to be afraid," said the house master of Taixian with a smile. There was a hint of wickedness in her smile. She had called herself that again. Yi Futian's face darkened, but he still nodded. He walked in front of Gai Shishir, still holding the spear. Gai Shishir had indeed come here today, seeking Yi Futian's life. He had broken out of the cultivator's encirclement, used the Golden Divine Spear to attack him, launched a surprise attack, and then had a Run Huang level cultivator interfere. All along the way, he had fought with killing force. All of this had been done to kill him. He had not shown any mercy. The Prince of the Golden Divine Nation had done all of this without any scruples at all. He lowered his head and looked down at Gai Shishir. The cultivators watching this scene from a distance felt their hearts tremble. They had all thought that Empress Yin would let him go. They had not thought that she would not act, but would let Yi Futian continue their previous fight. Previously, Gai Shishir had already lost, and his Run Huang implement had been taken. If they continued, he would most certainly be killed. It would be just like before. That was how the situation was shaping up before the Run Huang had appeared. Now things were back where they had started. Blood trickled down Gai Shishir's forehead. Brilliant golden light shone in his eyes as he stared at Yi Futian. Powerful will blazed in those eyes, as if he were warning Yi Futian. He was the Prince of the Golden Divine Nation, the most outstanding young person there. He did not believe that his opponent would dare kill him. "I really don't care whether you live or die, even if you are the strongest member of the younger generation of the Golden Divine Nation. But if I let you go after all the things you've done, I won't be able to forgive myself. So what do you think I should do?" Yi Futian asked Gai Shishir. "The things that have happened here today have cancelled each other out. Let us return to our homes and cultivate, never to bother each other again," said Gai Shishir. Whoosh. As he said this, Yi Futian brought his arm down. Gai Shishir twitched fiercely and gave a terrible groan. He stared up at Yi Futian, then looked down at his chest. The divine spear had been inserted right next to his heart, and terrible will was surging through his body. It seemed as if it could destroy his flesh at any moment. Everyone who was watching felt their hearts tremble fiercely. This was so cruel. Yi Futian had actually stabbed him. "You're funny." Yi Futian moved the spear. His expression was still calm, and undisturbed as he watched Gai Shirshir. The things that had happened here today had cancelled each other out. Finally, things are getting interesting. Yi Futian looked back and saw Empress Yin smiling coldly. She seemed very satisfied. When someone from Taishan Mountain had been abused like this, it was not something that could be resolved with words. The master had broken through to the next level not long ago, and the Golden Divine Nation still dared to look down on them? Who were they kidding? If Yi Futian had been defeated, she would not have been able to say anything. If he couldn't win, then how could Renhuang-level cultivators get involved? Golden blood flowed, staining Gai Shirshir's golden robes. Everyone watching from a distance was shocked by this. Even the cultivators from top forces, and those who had fought Yi Futian before felt their hearts tremble. Gai Shirshir had tried to kill Yi Futian today, but now the prince of the Golden Divine Nation had been mistreated by two people in a row. It was complete humiliation. It was quite awful. Of course, this was the price that he had to pay for what he had done. Empress Yen, came a cold voice. Golden light fell from the sky upon Empress Yen and Yi Futian. It was filled with terrible power. It seemed as if Empress Yan's fragile body could be pierced by this golden divine light at any moment. Are you trying to start a war between the Golden Divine Nation and Taishan Mountain? Said the Renhuang coldly. Are you trying to scare me? Empress Yin looked up into the air. When you first interfered, how did you not realize this would happen? Did you think that if the Golden Divine Nation struck the first blow, Taishan Mountain would not dare respond? She rose up into the air slowly. A burst of incredibly powerful will swept out, filling the whole area. Now we must repay you for the harm that you have done to Taishan Mountain. Empress Yan's smile was still beautiful and mischievous, but there was a coldness to it as well. A burst of radiant light bloomed from Empress Yen. At that moment, she seemed even more divine and noble. It was as if she was the empress of the whole world. Billowing will surged through her body. Whoosh! Everyone saw brilliant beams of light flash into life. In the next moment, a pair of wings appeared behind Empress Yen, shining with dazzling golden light that covered the earth and filled the sky. Her body transformed as well. Divine light covered her, transforming her into a goddess. The illusions of countless divine wings appeared, and endless will descended from the heavens, resonating with them. It seemed as if all of this was happening due to her power. A storm of the Great Path whipped through the area. It blew through Linqiao City, and everyone felt as if their flesh would be torn apart. Everyone looked up at the Empress in the sky, and their hearts trembled unceasingly. Would a battle between Renhuangs break out in the sky above Linqiao City today? The three Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation stood in three different places. One was in front, and two were behind him. The Renhuang in front could naturally feel how powerful their opponent's aura was. He knew that he was the only one who could fight this battle. Incomparably brilliant golden light exploded from him, hurting everyone's eyes. There was a clanging sound as golden chains shot through the air, covering the sky. They were trying to enclose the whole area. How should this debt be settled? Said Empress Yen with a smile as she stood there in the air like a goddess. As she said this, she flapped her wings and suddenly, the storm that was whipping through the sky knocked over the people watching down below in Linqiao City. What was even more frightening was that countless divine wings slashed out, cutting through the golden chains, and then moving on towards the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation. Every single wing was like a falling sky sword. The Renhuang of the Golden Divine Nation shone with incomparably brilliant golden light, and it seemed as if a divine will had flashed to life within him, its golden pattern giving off an incomparably dazzling radiance. Endless golden chains shot through the air, locking down the entire area. Whoosh! A wild wind blew, and the frightening storm made it so that the saint-level cultivators could barely stand. In fact, they were blown away. Even Yi Futian, who was standing behind Empress Yen, could clearly feel how powerful the wind was. He was firmly planted in place, one foot upon Gai Shirshir. If Gai Shirshir's body was not so strong, Yi Futian's foot would have crushed him. But even so, Yi Futian was putting a lot of pressure on him, because he wanted to stay in place, which was making Gai Shirshir bleed even more. His expression was full of murderous intent. This was a great humiliation. Yi Futian looked back and saw the storm heading far away, carrying away several renhuangs. He still saw Empress Yin flapping her wings, seeming to split the sky in two, and cutting through the golden chains. The house master of Taishan was so strong that those renhuangs would probably not survive. After all, she was one of the 4 great disciples of Lord Taishan, even if she was the youngest of them. Yi Futian looked back at Gai Shishir and said, "Have you thought it through?" Gai Shishir looked at him with humiliation and anger. He had once set foot on Taishan Mountain, seeking to become a disciple of Lord Taishan. But he had been refused, which had made him unhappy. As a prince of the Golden Divine Nation, and the foremost young talent, joining Taishan Mountain as a cultivator would be a confirmation of their strength. And yet he had been refused at the gate. Thus, he had targeted Yi Futian. However, how could he have known that a day would come when Yi Futian would be stepping on him? Yi Futian still looked indifferent when he saw Gai Shishir's expression. Gai Shishir was naturally talented, and was a prince of the Golden Divine Nation. He was even said to be a candidate for the future ruler. So he was incredibly arrogant. When he acted, he gave no thought for the consequences. With such a high status, he was not afraid of anything. So he had tried to kill Yi Futian. Even up until now, he did not realize what he had done. It seems like you have not given it enough thought yet. Yi Futian lifted the spear and thrust it down. This time, he thrust it right into Gai Shishir's heart. Gai Shishir was incredibly powerful. Even though the spear pierced his heart, it would still not be easy for it to kill him. After all, he had a body of the great path. But in the instant that the spear came down, his heart stopped beating. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Yi Futian. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Gai Shishir seemed to realize that he and the man who was looking at him were very similar. He may have called himself a simple musician of Taishan Mountain, but when he was angered he also did not care about the consequences. Gai Shishir seemed to realize that he and the man who was looking at him were very similar. He may have called himself a simple musician of Taishan Mountain, but when he was angered, he also did not care about the consequences. The golden blood seemed to stop flowing within him, as if it was congealing. His life aura began to flow away from him. It would be difficult for this spear piercing his heart to kill him. But if Yi Futian kept on like this, and did not give him a chance to recover, his life energy would all be used up, and he would die. "What do you want?" he asked. He had already realized that Yi Futian might not want to kill him, but also did not want to let him go. So he must want something. Yi Futian looked at Gai Shishir with a cold expression. "The Sai of the Divine God cultivation spell," he said. He was more interested in increasing his own power than taking Gai Shishir's life. This was the only thing that had surprised him in his battle with Gai Shishir. It was like a god descending to earth, and then giving a Sai that could increase one's combat ability. It had increased Gai Shishir's already formidable combat ability to the next level, pushing him to his limits. His combat ability was already incredible, but who would not want to become even stronger? If he cultivated the Sai of the Divine God, how powerful would his attack power become? People said that Gai Shishir was an incredible talent, and that he was the future heir of the Golden Divine Nation. But he had been defeated, so what was the harm in letting him live? If he could crush him once, he would always be able to do so. A life for a spell. Gai Shishir stared at Yi Futian. "It would be too great a threat for you to kill me. But if you get the spell of the Golden Divine Nation, are you sure you will be able to handle it?" The Sai of the Divine God was the ultimate technique of the Divine Golden Nation, and only the royal family had the right to cultivate it. Some of the Runhuang level cultivators had never cultivated this spell. Among the top powers, an ultimate technique like this would not be permitted to pass to the outside world. If someone stole it, they would have to be killed. Did Yi Futian think that he would be free from danger if he learned this technique? "You said a life for a spell. This is very fair," said Yi Futian. Gai Shishir stared at him, then said, "Fine, I will give it to you." I would have thought that the Prince of the Divine Golden Nation would have struggled at least a little bit to protect his nation's ultimate technique. "It seems that you fear death even more than I thought," said Yi Futian mockingly. He did not care about the consequences when it came to killing others. but he feared his own death. He was cruel to others and merciful to himself. Lines of golden light bloomed from Gai Shirshir's forehead. This was the power of his divine spirit. Yi Futian did not block them, but let them enter him. Under these circumstances, Gai Shirshir could not play any tricks, as he could end his life at any time. The lines of divine spirit transformed into memories as they entered his mind. Yi Futian did not immediately let Gai Shirshir go, but instead spent a moment sensing. The memories evolved in his mind. He could picture a divine god descending to earth. He knew that this was a true law power. Gai Shirshir did not want to put his life in danger. After all, the spear was still in his heart. Those who were watching saw all this happen with their own eyes, and their hearts trembled. Yi Futian had stolen the ultimate technique of the golden divine nation, the sigh of the divine god. This guy was incredibly cruel. He actually dared to do it, Wan Shi thought to himself. Even though Fourth Miss had interfered and told Yi Futian to do whatever he wanted, it still took a lot of guts to face the heir apparent of the divine golden nation and do what he had done. With this, Yi Futian had offended the entire divine golden nation. But he could understand why Yi Futian had done this. Gai Shirshir had tried to take his life again and again. So how could he put an end to it by simply letting him go? The enmity between them was already set. Thus, Yi Futian had taken the sigh of the divine god, as it would be very advantageous for him to have the ultimate technique of a powerful force. A terrible storm of the great path was still raging through the air. Yi Futian turned and looked up into the sky, where he saw 4 great renhuangs fighting amidst a dazzling light. Empress Yin was facing 3 renhuang by herself. She was bathed in divine light, and had transformed into a goddess. She was tall and mighty, and her wheel of the great path seemed to be formed of divine wings. It was as if it had evolved out of her life spirit. Her wings covered the sky, and they cut through the air ceaselessly as she fought. She had learned the sword arts of Lord Taixian as well, and she was using her wings as swords. 2 of the renhuangs of the golden divine nation had already been injured. Many ancient golden gods appeared around the renhuang, who had attacked Yi Futian before. Countless golden pillars fell from the sky, but this time he was not using them to attack, but rather to defend. These giant pillars formed up around him, forming golden divine gates that revolved around him, seeking to block the attack power that was coming towards him. Countless divine wings fell from the sky, every feather containing incomparable slicing power. When they fell on the golden divine gates, an ear-piercing sound would ring out, difficult for those watching from below to bear. The golden gates split open as cracks appeared in them. The wings cut through them. The renhuang within the gates looked surprised. His divine will surged with power, and endless beams of light covered him. His giant body turned golden. It was as if it had been forged of pure gold. As his wheel of the great path surged, the incomparably brilliant golden pattern shot forth golden chains. They raced through the air in an instant, then latched onto the onrushing divine wings, seeking to stop them. But at that moment, the people below saw incomparably brilliant divine light covering Empress Yin. Even more divine wings burst from her. She was bathed in the light of the great path. As she stepped forward, everyone could only see a beam of light crossing through the sky. They could not even tell how fast she was moving. In the next instant, they saw a burst of powerful light explode as the light of the great path descended from the sky, hurting everyone's eyes. Even the saint-level cultivators had to close their eyes and sense things with their divine spirits. But even their divine spirits could sense how powerful this was. Even though the fighting was taking place far away and high up in the air, their bodies still shook. Many buildings within Linxiao City collapsed and shattered, or were split open. Cracks appeared in the ground. They could not bear such a powerful aftershock. Amidst their daze, they seemed to be able to see Empress Yin rush towards her opponent. He thrust her slender hands forward, and light wrapped around them. An incredible destructive power burst forth from them, destroying the endless chains. The brilliant golden pattern shattered as well. When the attack struck her opponent, it made cracks appear in the renhuang's wheel of the great path, and it smashed a hole into his body, sending him flying back. Cough! A mouthful of golden blood fell out of the air. The renhuang's blood was the blood of the great path. and every drop contained the power of the great path within it. Even those who had not cultivated to high levels could feel the will within it. But it was rare to get to see it, since battles between renhuangs were so rare, and one of them being wounded was even rarer. But a battle of this level had broken out at Linxiao City today. Is there anyone else here today who wants to attack a disciple of Taishan Mountain? The house master of Taishan swept her gaze over everyone. She also looked down at the renhuangs from the divine capital of Xiling. Old demon Luo of the divine capital of Xiling had once personally launched a surprise attack against her master at Taishan Mountain in order to stop him from breaking through to the next level. He had been defeated, wounded, and forced to flee, and her master had broken through to the next level. Ever since, Taishan Mountain's status within the higher heavens realm had changed. It was very rare for a top-level figure to break through to the next level. Who would have thought that even after that defeat, that the people of the divine capital of Xiling still hadn't had enough, so they would covertly send renhuangs to interfere. If her master had not told her to rush over here, the consequences would have been serious. Futian would probably have been crippled by these people. Whoosh! She flapped her wings, and a storm of the great path whipped up. The terrible light from her wings shot towards the renhuangs from the divine capital of Xiling, ignoring the distance between them. But at that moment, the house master of Taishan frowned and looked off in a certain direction. There she saw divine golden light descending. It looked like there were two golden roads extending, and two figures descended upon them. The two figures were suffused with radiance and looked like they were made of gold. They were at the renhuang level, and the one in front had a particularly powerful aura, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the air. The Golden Divine Nation. It is Gai Shirshir's brother, the Prince of the Golden Divine Nation. Everyone's hearts trembled. Afterward, more powerful auras came over towards them, and several more renhuangs appeared. But they were not from the Golden Divine Nation. They had come from another force. The renhuangs of the Divine Swordly family. The renhuangs stood high in the air, ready to fight at any time. Everyone could feel their surging sword will. It seemed as if their swords would be unstoppable. What is going on? Everyone's heart beat wildly. Although there were many renhuangs among the various forces, this was limited to the top forces only. For the countless souls in the higher heavens realm, the renhuang plane was the absolute pinnacle for cultivators. The truly great people were those who could start their own force and teach people. The greatest of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path were not like this, but in the smaller realms, a renhuang would rule over the entire realm. But now many renhuangs had appeared here in Linxiao City due to this battle. What was going to happen? They could not have come from many different forces. Their appearance could only mean one thing. They had already been within the city, and thus they had been able to rush here. The previous cultivators had all come from the Divine Palace. Could it be that these renhuangs had come from there too? This battle had attracted the attention of many renhuangs. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Futian frowned as he watched the scene unfolding in the air, and a doubtful expression came over his face. Why had so many renhuang-level cultivators come? Futian frowned as he watched the scene unfolding in the air, and a doubtful expression came over his face. Why had so many renhuang-level cultivators come? Moreover, while more renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation had appeared, the house master of Taishan was still all alone. Would she run into difficulty? However, her expression was still calm, and she did not seem surprised by this. She had come from the Divine Palace, so she knew that there were many renhuangs there. Moreover, he did not have any fear of what was happening back home. Her master was there, and everything that was happening was taking place within his field of view. It's still the same. You can't beat me, so you send more people after me. The Divine Golden Nation gets weaker generation after generation. The house master of Taishan stared at the prince of the Divine Golden Nation as he came towards her. His name was Gaijiotian. The names of the princes of the Divine Golden Nation were each more arrogant than the last. Gaijiotian's name meant cover 9 heavens, and Gai Shirshir's name meant cover 10 worlds. How overbearing! Perhaps they meant to inspire the younger members of the divine golden nation to cultivate harder with these names, so that they could live up to them. Gai Jiutian stood in the air, his golden eyes staring at the house master of Taishian and Yi Futian. He naturally saw Gai Shishir as well. His little brother, a prince of the divine golden nation, had been beaten so miserably. Was Taishian Mountain really going to be so arrogant just because Lord Taishian had broken through to the next level? Whether or not the divine golden nation is weakening is not for you to judge, said Gai Jiutian icily. A burst of monstrous great path power burst from him. His wheel of the great path appeared indistinctly, making his body tall and powerful as he transformed into a golden god of war. The wheel of the great path that he had forged took the form of a statue of a golden ancient god. It seemed to have been cast from pure gold, and endless will had been carved into it. Once it was activated, the figures of countless golden gods appeared in the air and descended, filling the sky. Everyone could feel a burst of tremendous power coming from them, which made it difficult to breathe. It was said that the princes of the divine golden nation were descended from ancient gods. In this generation, they were all extremely talented and widely famed. Gai Shishir was said to be the best of his generation, and word of his talent had spread throughout the world. But his brother was extremely powerful as well, and the blood of ancient golden gods flowed through his veins too. When these incomparably brilliant golden gods flashed into being, a divine melody seemed to fill the air. It was as if they were singing. Their song contained incredible power. Endless golden light shone from them as they descended from the sky, making it so that people could not help but kneel on the ground in reverence. They're so strong. The cultivators in Linqiao City trembled slightly as they looked up. The figures in the sky seemed like actual gods. The man who had just arrived was far stronger than the previous Renhuang. After all, the previous Renhuang had not truly been an heir of the golden divine nation, and the blood of gods had not flowed through his veins. And now Gai Jiutian was here. He, on the other hand, truly was an heir of the divine blood of the golden divine nation. As the gods descended, everyone felt the urge to lay prostrate. Their power and their brilliant radiance made it seem like gods were truly coming down to earth to purify it of all sins. This time, the house master of Taishian could feel the pressure too. The opponent before her was much more powerful than the previous Renhuang. And it was not just that he was stronger. He would probably not be easy to deal with. Her divine wings covered the sky, casting endless light. A storm of the great path whipped up. The extreme majesty of the empress standing there in the air made people want to bow down as well. Gai Jiutian formed a seal with both hands, and the sound of heavenly singing filled the air. Many divine figures materialized, an endless golden light covered the area. There was nowhere to go to avoid it. It covered everything. Boom! A low sound rang out as Gai Jiutian thrust out his golden hand. And it was not just him. The descending gods thrust out their golden hands all well, filling the sky with fists that shot towards Empress Yan. Bang! Yi Futian could feel an extremely heavy pressure, making him put his feet back on solid ground, leaving a footprint. It was not just him. All the other cultivators found it hard to stand under such pressure. Their legs bent, and they squatted down on the ground. Many people in Linqiao City were knocked over. Empress Yin flapped her wings, and the images of many more brilliant divine wings appeared in the air. They cut through the sky, colliding with the oncoming fists. This created a terrifying storm of the great path. Gai Jiutian took a step down. He had not thought that a single blow would be enough to defeat Empress Yin. Lord Taishian only had 4 great disciples, and all of them were famous. Although Empress Yin was the youngest and the weakest, her talent and combat prowess were undeniable. The power of the great path surged through the sky, and even more images of golden gods appeared, then shot towards Empress Yin in a flash, trying to engage in close combat with her. When her wings lashed out, the golden gods stretched out their hands to block them, or exploded as they slammed into them. Gai Jiutian transformed into a beam of golden light, and descended in front of Empress Yin. Calling upon the sigh of the divine god, he reached out with both hands. A golden light shot through the sky and sought to pierce through Empress Yin. However, everyone saw Empress Yin rush towards the opponent, not trying to evade at all. She was bathed in the light of the great path, as she lashed out with her fist. Incomparable power burst forth from her beautiful and delicate body, enough power to break the air itself. The Renhuangs who were standing around them were not surprised when they saw her lash out. She had cultivated the ways of space, storms, and swordsmanship. She had been very violent in her youth, and thus her attack power was incredible. Before she had reached the Renhuang plain, she was already very famous. Although she was a woman, she fought viciously. Even when facing Gai Jiutian, she did not have any desire to evade, and instead, she met him head-on. When the two of them collided, brilliant light dazzled everyone as it filled the air. People who were only at the Saint Plain could not see what was going on inside. They could only hear dull thuds. It seemed like they struck each other many times quickly. Each blow made the people watching from below feel the blood surge in their veins, as the will within them screamed. Many buildings swayed and shook, then collapsed. More and more cracks appeared on the earth. It was as if an earthquake had started, but these were just the tremors caused by the battle up in the air. The other Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation stepped forward as well, shining with brilliant light. It seemed like they might intervene at any point. And the other Renhuang, who had been wounded by Empress Yin previously, stepped forward as well, looking at Yi Futian down below him. He still had Gai Shishir in his clutches, and had wounded him badly. In addition, Yi Futian had forced Gai Shishir to teach him the ultimate technique, known as the breathe of the divine god. This man could not be allowed to live. Yi Futian frowned as he felt a terrible pressure on him. He glanced at Gai Shishir, and put the golden divine spear to his throat. If the Renhuang did anything, he would stop being so polite. You already have what you want. Why have you not let him go yet? Said the Renhuang. Yi Futian's expression remained cold. This matter was not over yet. If he let this man go now, it would surely lead to his doom. The Renhuang continued forward, and terrible killing light flashed out of his eyes. Yi Futian could feel it infecting his thoughts, and his divine spirit trembled. He put a little bit of pressure on the spear, piercing into Gai Shishir's throat. A drop of blood appeared on the spear's tip. Boom! 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 Golden pillars fell from the sky once again, sealing off the area, and trying to imprison Yi Futian within them. The Renhuang continued forward, his golden light still terrible. He knew that Yi Futian would not dare kill Gai Shishir, lest he was killed himself. Once he had killed Gai Shishir, he would have nothing to protect himself with, and would be killed for sure. At that moment, they heard a phoenix's call from off in the distance. The heavens and the earth shook. A look of surprise came over little Phoenix's face as she watched from below. She looked in the direction that the phoenix cry had come from and whispered, "Mother and Father." And indeed, once she said this, brilliant divine light bloomed in the sky. Two divine phoenixes appeared, rushing towards the battlefield. They circled Gai Jiutian and Empress Yen, guarding against the Renhuangs approaching from the side. A heroic-looking middle-aged man appeared in the air above Yi Futian and floated there. As he stood there, he swept his gaze over the Renhuang, who was approaching Yi Futian. He had a cold expression on his face. String Emperor. The Renhuang's expression changed. A brilliant light shone from String Emperor, and a brilliant divine Guqin appeared. An invisible force swept out, and in an instant countless Guqin strings appeared all around them. String Emperor stretched out his pale-fingered hand. He plucked the strings in the air, and at that moment, the strings of the worldly great path trembled. Endless beams of light shot out, striking everything. The Renhuang groaned. It was as if he had been pierced by one of the beams of light. His divine spirit trembled fiercely, and his face grew dark. String Emperor continued plucking strings. Endless notes of the great path flowed through the air, and many beams of light flashed, shooting towards the Renhuang and ignoring his defenses. The Renhuang tried to retreat, his face growing pale. His divine power seemed useless at that moment, as the notes' attack power continuously infected his divine spirit. He groaned again and spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone felt their hearts tremble as they beheld this scene. This was String Emperor, the third disciple of Lord Taishian. He was at a higher level than Empress Yen, and so it was only natural that his opponent could not withstand him. He is using the great path as strings. Everyone trembled. This was the power of a Renhuang-level musician. The wheel of the Great Path that he had created was a string wheel, and he could use the worldly Great Path as his guqin strings. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian looked at String Emperor and saw that his body was shining brilliantly. A guqin appeared in his hands, full of the light of the Great Path. Moreover, it resonated with the worldly Great Path, making many huge guqin strings appear in the air. Every string was a part of the guqin. Yi Futian looked at String Emperor and saw that his body was shining brilliantly. A guqin appeared in his hands, full of the light of the Great Path. Moreover, it resonated with the worldly Great Path, making many huge guqin strings appear in the air. Every string was a part of the guqin. So this is a wheel of the Great Path. Yi Futian said to himself. When a Renhuang-level cultivator forged a wheel of the Great Path, they shone with the sun and the moon, and could use all of the worldly Great Path. They could use their life spirit to change in an evolutionary manner. Renhuang-level cultivators had the Great Path etched onto their very bones and immersed in their veins once they forged their wheel. Thus, their descendants could directly inherit their divine wheel life spirit, giving them outstanding power. Once they reached this level, their every movement was filled with will. Their divine wheels were even more powerful than ritual implements, and thus ritual implements of their level were, in fact, useless to them. Only those ritual implements that transcended their level were of use to them. At that moment, String Emperor strode through the air with incomparable power. He stretched out a hand and waved his fingers through the air. The strings of the Great Path crossed over each other as they danced through the sky. Many of the cultivators in Linshao City covered their ears, but they still could feel their spirits tremble. It was incredibly difficult to bear. But this was not directed at them. It was directed at the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation. The countless strings of the Great Path resonated with the Renhuang's body, and he trembled violently in conjunction with the strings. It seemed like his spirit was being pierced through again and again. His face grew more and more pale, and his aura grew weaker. Other Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation tried to rush over to help, and their will bloomed as they charged at String Emperor. But String Emperor reached out his other hand and moved his fingers. The Great Path flowed backward, and countless rays of formless light shot towards the Renhuangs. It seemed to pierce right through them, and it bound up their will. Moreover, the vibrating strings intertwined into a piece of music. It was one of the 6 famous songs of String Palace, Worldly Judgment. The destructive storm grew more and more powerful, and the Renhuangs were put under great pressure as they were shaken by the vibrating strings. He's so strong. Below them, everyone who was watching felt their hearts tremble. The Renhuangs who had come from all the great powers saw this as well. They were not surprised. This is what they had expected to happen. String Emperor was at a high enough level to crush several of the Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation. And this was why String Emperor was actually being merciful. Otherwise, these Renhuangs would be suffering more injuries than just being bound up by the music. Bang! A loud noise rang out. Gai Jiutian and Empress Yin flew apart and floated in the air. The 2 phoenixes were still guarding them as they circled around, making an ugly look come over Gai Jiutian's face. At the same time, String Emperor plucked the strings again, and a high-pitched sound rang out. Several of the Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation groaned and spat up mouthfuls of blood. Their auras grew weaker. It was clear that they had been badly wounded. The next time I see you bullying a junior from Taishan Mountain like this, I will not be so polite, said String Emperor calmly. He was usually gentle and merciful, but now his tone carried a hint of coldness. It was obvious that he was showing as much mercy here as he ever would. I have long heard your name spoken, String Emperor. You have learned much from Lord Taishan, and you are truly a master musician, said Gai Jiutian. However, your junior here has stolen an ultimate technique from the Divine Golden Nation. What do you think of that? That is an easy problem to solve. Gai Shirshir sought to kill him previously, so let us first let him kill Gai Shirshir. Then we can talk about him stealing your ultimate technique. How does that sound? Answered String Emperor. Golden light flashed in Gai Jiotian's eyes. "You people from the divine golden nation have no spine," said Empress Yin mockingly. "He traded your ultimate technique for his life. How about we clean this filth away for you, and then we will return your technique. Also, the prince of the divine golden nation launched a surprise attack on our disciple. And you have not said a word about how your Renhuangs got involved too. What is the meaning of this?" She could not believe that he still wanted the ultimate technique back. It had been seized, and so it was seized. Gai Shishir had chosen to trade it for his life. If they had not been there, Yi Futian would have been killed. Would the people of the Golden Divine Nation have slain Gai Shishir to pay for his life? The people of Linxiao City were watching everything that was happening. The battle between people at the peak of the saint level had led to many Renhuangs appearing. A battle had broken out between the Renhuangs of Taishan Mountain and the Divine Golden Nation. Moreover, considering the situation, the fact that String Emperor was here meant that it was highly likely that there were even more powerful figures from the two great powers present. It was very likely that they were within the Divine Palace. All of them had come from that direction. No one knew what this conflict would evolve into. At that moment, a terrible airflow descended from the sky. A group of figures appeared, all of them cultivators from many different powers. Many of them were at the Renhuang level. Yi Futian noticed some of the talented individuals who had traveled to the Divine Palace with him among them. The Divine Swordly family, the Changfeng family, the Sky-Burying God clan, and more were all there. The Divine Palace itself had even sent cultivators. The Palace Lord of the Divine Music Palace had come personally. Some of the top figures of the divine capital of Xiling had come as well. He saw the prince of the divine capital of Xiling, who had come to Taishan Mountain to make trouble. His aura was mighty, and he gave off a powerful pressure. There was another familiar figure as well. It was the divine general from the Golden Divine Nation, who had brought Gai Shishir to Taishan Mountain. His body shone brilliantly with light that incomparably beautiful. He looked at Yi Futian, making him feel as if he could not breathe. He had brought Gai Shishir to Taishan Mountain to seek to become Lord Taishuan's disciple, but he had been refused. Now that he watched this battle, he could tell that the man who had resonated with the character that read the way and used the fleeting divine sword was the young man before his eyes. He clenched his fists. Suddenly, Yi Futian involuntarily released the spear in his hands, dropping it. If he hadn't, his whole body would have followed it. The golden divine spear fell directly into his opponent's hands. A burst of golden light covered Gai Shishir's body. Yi Futian narrowed his eyes, but he couldn't stop it. He could only watch as his opponent took Gai Shishir away. But in this current situation, there was no longer any use for him to continue threatening Gai Shishir. The great figures of both sides were all here. There was no more point in people threatening each other. Gai Shishir returned to the sky, but he was still badly wounded. He looked down at Yi Futian, his eyes full of murderous intent. His mission to kill Yi Futian had failed miserably, and he had lost a lot of prestige and respect. He had launched a sneak attack, not caring about what others would think. If he had won, he would have been called a king. If he lost, he would be called a fool. He only cared about results. But in the end, he had been defeated and humiliated. Yi Futian had made a mockery of everything he had done. The divine general of the Golden Divine Nation looked down at Yi Futian, but did not do anything against him. He had seen everything that had happened before. In reality, both sides of this conflict had their own plans. It seemed like this man had a very high position within Taishan Mountain. Could he be Lord Taishuan's secret disciple? There definitely seemed to be some secrecy about him. Your cultivation methods seem to be from the heavenly mandate realm. We would at least like to know where this man who has stolen our ultimate technique hails from, said the divine general to Yi Futian. His power descended. Yi Futian knew that he could not withstand him. In the previous battle, many cultivators had used Renhuang implements to attack him, so he had needed to use up a lot of his power. Of course, maybe Lord Taishan had already noticed what was going on, but he had not come to investigate. There was no point in hiding his identity any longer. The flesh of his face transformed, and his dark hair turned silvery white. A more handsome face appeared. Everyone's eyes fell upon Yi Futian. So he had been using the art of disguise. Moreover, this heroic figure, with his handsome face, his snow-white hair, and his dark eyes that were so deep they seemed to be without end, seemed to be full of stories. This man may not have the outstanding family background that Guy Sure had, but he had much more experience than him. "It's you!" came a cry from beside the palace lord of the Divine Music Palace, full of shock. It was Yen Sui, the disciple of the Divine Music Palace. He had been badly beaten by Yi Futian at the Divine Palace. Now that he saw his true face, and knew that this was the young man who had fought Yi Tianyu at Xiantian Pavilion, how could he not be shocked? He had become incredibly strong, and what was worse, he had come here to the Divine Palace, Yen Sui's home ground. "You know him?" the palace lord of the Divine Music Palace asked Yen Sui. Yen Sui nodded, and his face became ugly. "I am Yi Futian. I am here on a journey from the Heavenly Mandate Realm." As he said this, the whole area became incredibly quiet. This man had come from the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Moreover, he was a casual cultivator. Yi Futian had once traveled with the Celestial Gate of Vast Heaven, but he was not their disciple. He had learned the ultimate technique of the Divine Elephants, but he was not a member of their clan. He was indeed a casual cultivator. He had not truly joined any power. The palace lord of the Divine Music Palace looked at him. He already knew that when Yi Tianyu had returned to the Heavenly Mandate Realm, a battle had broken out there. He was not the only one who realized this. Many others knew it as well. A cultivator from the Heavenly Mandate Realm had defeated many outstanding cultivators from the great forces of the Higher Heavens Realm, including at the Land of Proving the Way, and now he had defeated Guy Sure and others. In addition, he had come to the Divine Palace. This was magnificent. This must be the most powerful member of the younger generation of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. What was even more amazing was that he had learned the ultimate techniques of so many great powers, but he was just a casual cultivator. Yi Futian looked at String Emperor and Empress Yen and said, "Before I came to the Divine Palace, I went to Taishan Mountain, and it was indeed to seek the way. I only hid my identity, because there are those who wish me harm." Not far away, Wan Shuyi heard what Yi Futian was saying, and suddenly, many things made sense. No wonder he had been so restrained at Taishan Mountain. He had put all of his energy into seeking the way. He had not wanted to stir up trouble at all. If he had not been attacked by Guy Sure today, he would still not have revealed his identity. He would have returned to Taishan Mountain to cultivate quietly. "I was the one who brought you to Taishan Mountain to cultivate. I don't care who you are," said Empress Yen. If she cared, she would not have brought him there. She had known what kind of person he was when she had heard his music. She had known that he was extraordinary, but she had not thought that he would be this outstanding. "No matter who he is, since he came to Taishan Mountain, he is our disciple," said String Emperor. Now, the Golden Divine Nation looked at Yi Futian as an enemy, and it seemed that there were those who had already borne ill will against Yi Futian. They naturally needed to protect him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian was filled with emotion as he remembered the first time he had met the House Master of Taishan and String Emperor. Yi Futian was filled with emotion as he remembered the first time he had met the House Master of Taishan and String Emperor. The first time he had met the House Master of Taishan, he had played her a song, and then she had brought him to Taishan Mountain. He had met String Emperor at String Pavilion, where he had given him a famous guqin, and told him he could take anything within String Pavilion. At that time, he was just a musician, not a disciple of Taishan Mountain. But the two of them had not cared about who he was. It was just the same now. No matter who he was, as long as he was cultivating at Taishan Mountain, he was their disciple, and they would not let the Golden Divine Nation hurt him. A look of surprise came over the faces of the people of Linshao City. String Emperor and Empress Yen had not even known Yi Futian's true identity. It seemed like he was not Lord Taishuan's secret disciple then. He was incredibly talented. He had come from the Heavenly Mandate Realm, and was probably one of the most powerful cultivators there. Yen Sui seemed to recognize him. And the Renhuangs from the great powers seemed to know a little bit about him as well. With so much talent, there was no way that he was unknown in the heavenly mandate realm. How could a casual cultivator be so talented and so powerful? Now it seemed like Taishan Mountain would certainly protect him. The Renhuangs of the Golden Divine Nation could naturally see this as well. String Emperor and Empress Yen had both shown that if anyone wanted to hurt Yi Futian, they would do their best to make that impossible. This was their attitude, and it was also Taishan Mountain's attitude. Both of these disciples of Lord Taishan were powerful, and they represented the will of Taishan Mountain. In the past, the Golden Divine Nation would have needed to worry about the will of Taishan Mountain. But now things were different. Once Lord Taishan had broken through to the next level, everything had changed. Taishan Mountain's status would never be the same. I was a rare opportunity for Lord Taishan to receive an invitation to a sparring session at the Divine Palace, and for his juniors to take part in the journey to the land of proving the way. He certainly did not want to miss the chance to test himself against others, and to see the great figures among the youth of the higher heavens realm. Came the Palace Lord of the Divine Music Palace's voice. He is a guest in the Divine Palace even as we speak. All of the great forces have people here. So what use is there in disturbing this harmonious atmosphere? Why don't we let the Divine Palace keep some face and end this here? The situation had reached a stalemate. No one wanted to act. The Golden Divine Nation was clearly in the wrong here, as Gai Shir had attacked Yi Futian, but they had not succeeded, and had instead suffered great losses and been humiliated. Their ultimate technique had even been stolen. It could be said that they had paid a heavy price for what they had done. If Taishan Mountain did not protect him, then Yi Futian would die. But Taishan Mountain was taking such an aggressive stance that if the Renhuangs continued fighting, then Lord Taishan himself would probably come. The Golden Divine Nation had to accept this humiliation. Gai Shir had simply not been good enough. The Palace Lord of the Divine Music Palace was playing the peacemaker. The Divine General of the Golden Divine Nation knew that things could not continue like this. And so he looked at Yi Futian and said, I do not wish to see our ultimate technique in your hands, and I do not wish to see it fall into anyone else's hands. Think about this. Brilliant divine light pierced Yi Futian's eyes, and the Divine General's voice carried a hint of threat with it. The Divine General continued, Since the Lord of the Divine Music Palace has spoken, we will end it here. Let's go. On saying this, he turned and walked away. The cultivators of the Golden Divine Nation glanced at Yi Futian, then turned and followed him. Dazzling golden light flashed in the sky as they all disappeared. At that moment, the Prince of the Divine Capital of Xiling looked at Yi Futian and said in a cold voice, I look forward to our next meeting. Then he and his people turned and left as well. What a pack of rats, said String Emperor mockingly. He had always borne a grudge against the Divine Capital of Xiling for their surprise attack. At that time, the master had only punished them lightly and not pursued the matter. But if it had been him, he would not have let it go. He would have taught all of the Divine Capital of Xiling a lesson that they would not soon forget. There were many people here from all the great powers, and many of them were at the Renhuang level. They looked at Yi Futian. This proud son of heaven, who had come from the heavenly mandate realm, had entered the Divine Palace. In the future, he would probably become like Huang Zhong. Empress Yan's aura disappeared, and she walked over to String Emperor's side. Should we return to the Divine Palace? She asked. Or return to Taishan Mountain? Let's go back to Taishan Mountain. The master will naturally return himself at some point, answered String Emperor. Dazzling divine light flashed, and the phoenixes alighted before him. He turned to Yi Futian and said, We are heading back to Taishan Mountain. Yi Futian nodded. Very well. Empress Yin turned and looked at Wan Shuyi and the others from Taishan Mountain. What are you waiting for? They all finally reacted. They all mounted the phoenixes. With a cry, the phoenixes rose into the air and flew away. All of the cultivators left. The great battle that had just taken place had devastated the area, making them all sigh. This battle had been started because of someone pursuing Yi Futian. But from this, they had all seen the disunity between the great powers. There would certainly be some trouble in the future. Upon the phoenix's back, Empress Yin looked at Yi Futian with interest. He narrowed his eyes when he saw her looking at him. White hair, white clothes, and a noble bearing, she said appreciatively. You are much more handsome than the stranger you were before. Yi Futian's face darkened. He looked furtively at String Emperor beside him. He had realized that although Empress Yin was a woman, she was most improper. Wan Shuyi and the others were embarrassed as well. Fourth Miss was up to her old trick again. However, Yi Futian was indeed much better looking now than he had been as Shen Jing. His aura was also far more outstanding, and his silvery white hair made him much more charming and heroic. Don't worry, I'll look after you from now on. Empress Yin patted his shoulder. Yi Futian feared that String Emperor was going to hit him. Heaven only knew what the relationship between those two was. In any case, it was not simple. Housemaster, is Lord Taixian at the Divine Palace? Asked Yi Futian. He was changing the subject, as he had a strong desire to keep living. Yes, the Palace Lord of the Divine Palace invited him for a sparring session. Many people have gone to watch, including Renhuangs from all the great powers. That is why you saw so many Renhuangs there, answered Empress Yen. Did you really enter the ancestral land in the Divine Palace? The Divine Temple of the Ancestral Land? Yi Futian looked at her, and then nodded. What was in there? She looked at him in eager anticipation. She seemed very interested in the temple. All of the great teachings of the Divine Palace, said Yi Futian. That's all. Yi Futian's answer had clearly not satisfied her curiosity. Of course, the great teachings had been there. But was that all there was? Why were they so serious about hiding it then? There were so few people who could enter the Divine Temple of the Ancestral Land. She did not believe that there were no secrets. Yi Futian felt a bit helpless. Housemaster, this. He could not be so casual about revealing the Divine Palace's secret. Sister, said String Emperor. It was Yi Futian's luck to be able to enter the Divine Temple of the Ancestral Land, and so he is keeping their secret for him. We should not force him to be dishonorable. Empress Yin looked at him, then seemed to lose interest, saying, so boring. But she did not pursue the matter. She walked over to one side and sat down. The ancestral temple of the Divine Palace, naturally, is connected to cultivation. Yi Futian smiled and said no more. He really could not reveal anything more. Even though he wanted to, this was a major secret. The Divine Palace had not prevented him from entering, and so if he gave up their secret so easily, it would be quite dishonorable. Empress Yen had evidently realized this as well, and did not want to make him dishonor himself, so she did not ask any more. The phoenixes flew quickly, shooting through the air towards Taixian Mountain. Within the Divine Palace, the things that had happened in Linxiao City spread quickly. Once Yen Sui returned, he sought out Yi Tianyu. At that moment, Yi Tianyu was standing before a palace hall. When he heard that Shen Jing was, in fact, Yi Futian, he did not know what to feel. He had appreciated everything that Shen Jing had done at the Divine Palace. He had been outstandingly talented and very prideful as well. Although he had not let him keep face, how could he blame him? Who did not have some arrogance in his heart? And now he knew why. So that was why he had advanced so quickly. He had reached Nirvana, entered the ancestral temple of the Divine Palace, and comprehended the 81 swords. At that moment, he felt like he was under pressure. Li Daozi and Gai Shishir had both lost to Yi Futian. If he and Yi Futian fought now, what would the outcome be? For that day would come sooner or later. What are you thinking about? Whispered Yi Man beside him. I must go into seclusion and continue cultivating, said Yi Tianyu. Yi Man nodded. Ah, I will go with you. Excellent. Yi Tianyu turned and left. He needed to reach the Renhuang Plain more quickly. Once Yi Futian returned to Taixian Mountain, he continued cultivating at String Pavilion. Although he had caused a major disturbance, as far as he was concerned, nothing had changed. He needed to keep on like before and cultivate without drawing attention to himself. Now his identity had been revealed. Although Taixian Mountain was protecting him, he had offended the Golden Divine Nation, and he needed to reach the Renhuang Plain eventually in order to be able to protect himself. Many of the people on Taixian Mountain were discussing all that Yi Futian had done. He had quickly become a legendary figure there, and many people went to String Pavilion to visit him. But Yaya, who had come back from the divine palace with him, turned them all away. She gave them all the same answer. Yi Futian was cultivating in seclusion. Everyone was saddened by this, but they realized that it was the right thing for him to do. A man this legendary had the right to be proud. Lord Taishian returned to Taishian Mountain as well, but he did not seek out Yi Futian. He busied himself with his own cultivation, as if nothing had happened at the divine palace. Everything went on just as it had before. Moreover, this time Yi Futian planned to be in seclusion for a long period of time. Yi Tianyu, and even the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, would soon hear news that he was at Taishian Mountain. Under this situation, he could not leave the mountain whenever he pleased. So there was only one thing to do: cultivate. He planned to forge a body of the Great Path, and a soul of the way for himself. If he could directly become a Run Huang, that would be best. If he couldn't, he wouldn't come out until he couldn't go any farther. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1568. The 10,034th Year of the Divine Prefecture Calendar. Chapter 1568. The 10,034th Year of the Divine Prefecture Calendar. Yi Futian sat upon a mountain at String Pavilion, clouds floating all around him. His eyes were closed, and not one bit of his aura was going outside his body. An image of himself sat within his life palace. Here, the world tree towered over him, while seeping out of it as it soared into the sky. His life palace seemed like a world of its own. Many spirits curled around the world tree, giving off different kinds of will. Yi Futian seemed to be carving something into the ground. There were many different patterns: sword patterns, divine elephant patterns, and starry patterns. Each pattern was an incredible artistic conception, and will seem to seep out of them. He looked at the patterns, but he seemed to be dissatisfied with them. He waved his hand and erased them all. For those who were not cultivators, rushing to the Runhuang Plain seemed like an impossible task. It was impossible by its very nature. One had to forge a body of the Great Path and a soul of the way, link the two together, and make them resonate with the Great Path. Only then could one finally forge a wheel of the Great Path and reach the Runhuang Plain. But Yi Futian considered it further. He needed to consider what kind of wheel of the Great Path he would forge. He would not be stepping onto the Runhuang Plain in a simple manner. In order to forge a wheel of the Great Path, one needed to use one's body of the Great Path as the basis, and then take things step by step. If each step was different, the wheel of the Great Path that you forged would be different. Yi Futian had read many ancient texts about becoming a Runhuang, and thus he wanted to create a prototype of his wheel of the Great Path. Moreover, how many wheels would he forge? An ordinary cultivator would never dare to even think about this. Reaching the Runhuang Plain was already nearly impossible, but if he wanted to go further, he would need to set up an ideal foundation from the very start. The legendary Runhuang level was not the end, but merely another starting point. It was the starting point of becoming the most powerful person in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Thus he needed to be more cautious. Huang Zhong had already reached the next level, and was at the peak of the Saint Plain. He could already become a Runhuang, but he had not yet taken that step. Why? It was because extraordinary people had extraordinary ambitions. They were not content with merely becoming a Runhuang. They wanted to create outstanding wheels of the Great Path. Once they became Renhuangs, they would dominate other Renhuangs. Only the most powerful people would dare dream of this. Yi Futian thought of all the battles he had experienced both inside and outside the Divine Palace. His battle with Huang Zhong, and the battle where he was suppressed by the Runhuang from the Golden Divine Nation. When comparing the two of them, although Huang Zhong was not yet a Runhuang, when his bell of the Great Path rang out, the Great Path itself had collapsed. He had incorporated many types of will into his bell. If he forged it into a wheel of the Great Path, then when the endless divine bells appeared, they would be able to shake someone to death in an instant. A wheel of the Great Path could take all kinds of will into it. Even life spirits and the spells of the Divine Palace could be used as a foundation for a wheel of the Great Path. This was why Yi Futian was still thinking. He continued to carve patterns into the ground. Each one of the patterns contained powerful sword truths within them, but when he finished drawing them, he wiped them away yet again. It seemed that he was still not satisfied. He closed his eyes again and fell into a state of forgetting himself. Within his mind, he pictured all the great figures that he had met over the years, of the power that they had displayed, and the forces that they had let loose. Among them, the strongest was naturally Gu Tianxing of the demon realm, when he had taken advantage of the situation and fought against the dynastic overlord and several others. He remembered the scene vividly, but this type of power did not suit him. He thought of Lord Taixian, of old demon Luo, and of String Emperor. Guqin music began to play within his mind. The music gradually formed a picture. He drew on the ground for a while, quickly forming a pattern. The pattern contained countless notes. Each note looked like a sword. He looked at the pattern and finally did not erase it. It seemed that this pattern was finally what he was looking for. He looked at it for a while. Suddenly, the people in the outside world could feel a disturbance coming from where he was. He opened his eyes, full of determination. It seemed that he had made his mind up. Boom! A burst of terrible will roared through his body. Puff! After a moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura weakened, and his divine spirit retracted. His face was very pale. He had decided to try and rush towards the Renhuang plain. There was no need to pretend any longer. From now on, he would constantly be heading forward, never retreating. Yi Futian had cut his own life spirit a second time. He needed the Guqin spirit to return. He had envisioned the first of his wheels of the great path. It would be a Guqin wheel. Clouds rolled through the sky. Someone seemed to be watching him from a distance with a puzzled look. What had that guy done to himself? Had he really hurt himself when everything was in perfectly good condition? Did all young geniuses cultivate this way nowadays? Once he had recovered from his wound, Yi Futian left String Pavilion to visit Lord Taixian. Some people on Taixian Mountain could faintly hear divine music playing. After a month, Yi Futian was once again on the mountain behind String Pavilion, sitting cross-legged and playing his guqin. The music was a song of remembrance for the great path. The music lingered, and there were countless notes of the great path integrated into Yi Futian's sword will as it flowed around his body. Brilliant golden sword-shaped notes flowed through his veins and were carved on his bones. Another tree seemed to grow within him, and its trunk, branches, and leaves transformed into his limbs and skeleton. All of it was integrated together, and he was infused with the will of the great path. His blood surged through his veins as the music grew more lively. The sound of sword qi could be heard, and his body seemed to grow to fill a vast area. He was filled with infinite will, and his flesh, bones, and blood felt as if they were bearing the blows of 1,000 hammers. They were forging him into a body of the great path. After a few months, he had created a body of the great path, but he did not stop there. He used the power of the divine elephants to forge yet another one. The massive strength of the divine elephants surged continuously throughout his body, turning into countless great path particles that were carved into his veins, bones, and organs. Cultivators were not only able to create a single wheel of the great path. There was no limit to cultivation, and people's potential was endless. They could even carve different marks of the great path within their bodies. After a Renhuang had fallen, their descendants could feel many different kinds of will coming from their blood and bones. Yi Futian was an outstanding cultivator, and so he naturally was not going to only forge a single wheel of the great path. As far as he was concerned right now, his flesh was already at the level of a body of the great path when he had been at the divine palace. Now he was just perfecting it. He would be cultivating here for a long time. In the 10,034th year of the divine prefecture calendar, Yi Futian had already been shut away in cultivation for more than 2 years. It had been more than 3 years since he had come to the higher heavens realm. Many things had happened in the higher heavens realm over these 2 years, and much had happened in the heavenly mandate realm. Many people in the heavenly mandate realm had heard news of Yi Futian, including his enemies. They knew that Yi Futian had gone to Taixian Mountain to cultivate. But even though they knew this, they had no way to act against him. Once Lord Taixian had broken through to the next level, he was at the same level as Gu Tianxing. In the past, There had perhaps been 2 people who had reached this level, and Gu Tianxing had possibly reached the level of the old dynastic overlord. Now it was clear that there was no one at that level now, at least publicly. As for if anyone had reached it in secret, no one knew. At the very least, the present dynastic overlord of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty and the palace lord of the Violet Heavenly Palace had not reached that level. So it would be impossible for them to go to Taishan Mountain to seize Yi Futian. Nor could the Golden Divine Nation seize him. If they went themselves, they would be rebuffed, and so they would rather make plans in secret and stir up trouble from a safe position. These past few years, the Tai family and the Hua family had caused trouble many times. No one knew where they were cultivating now. None of them could be found. The Lady of Brahma's pure sky had hid herself away. It was said that she was cultivating with the foremost saint of Brahma's pure sky, Qin He, and teaching her the way. Some said that Qin He was becoming very powerful and would soon break through to the Renhuang plain. The Violet Heavenly Palace was working hard to train its younger members. However, even Zhang Yuan, with his supreme body of the Great Path, had been defeated several times, and it was not easy to train someone else up to this level. Geniuses like him were few and far between. There was someone in the forbidden land of the dragons, gods of the demon realm, who it seemed was being gradually forgotten by the Heavenly Mandate realm. In the Forbidden Canyon in Longyuan, countless dark chains filled the area. Within the dark depths, a jet-black, monstrous demon sat in cultivation. The images of demonic figures floated around him, making him seem even more powerful. It seemed as if he were a demon monarch who would conquer the world. An incomparably huge black dragon hovered at the peak of a dark mountain, endless demonic will spilling out from him. These past few years, he had devoted all his energy towards the uninvited guest, who had come more than 3 years ago. The cultivators of the dragon's gods had come a few times, but they had never entered. Perhaps they thought that he was only searching for a suitable person to pass on his demonic arts to. But in reality, he was the only one who understood why. It was the same as the reason why he had been imprisoned here. At that moment, lines of dark demon light spread out behind the figure. It gathered together into the image of a demon god, with demon generals all around him. But they all seemed incredibly polite. The demon dragon watched the scene taking place below him and began to move. His master was truly cruel in that he had asked him to wander about in the outside world. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.